In today's Insight, we're delving deeper into the Gaza conflict. Egypt has been the main mediator in the latest rounds of peace talks, but how the rest of the Arab world approaches the conflict is much more complex. CCTV's Francis Coe is here, looking specifically at the role of Iran, and we're seeing a bit of a shift this time around, aren't we?
Definitely, Mike, and that's right. The Gaza conflict has been going on for years. That's nothing new. It used to be an ideological division simply between Jews and Muslims, but it's not that simple anymore in the East today, and Iran has been especially quiet during this conflict. Here, we explore this issue with some perspective from the president of the National Iranian-American Council here in Washington. The dividing lines in Gaza are clear-cut. Israel on one side, Palestinians and Hamas on the other. But elsewhere in the Middle East, it's not quite so polarized, at least not this time around. Iran, like others in the Arab world, is a relatively passive one.
The Iranian rhetorical position has been much more muted than it's been before. In the past, Iranians have had a very high voice when it comes to this issue.
One factor is Iran's own bad blood with Hamas, exposed during Syria's ongoing civil war.
Where the Iranians were supporting Assad, Hamas broke with Assad and sided with the opposition. And the Iranians have been quite upset about this and view this as a betrayal.
So while Arab nations have sided with Hamas in the past, the Arab Spring has changed some of the thinking in countries like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates.
And the shift has been because these Arab monarchies are threatened by the political force that Hamas is a part of, which are moderate and are rooted in the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood.
Parsi said it also comes down to what's at stake for Iran. For instance, Iran's ongoing nuclear talks with the so-called P5+1 nations, including China and the United States. They're critical enough, he says, to bump the Gaza conflict way down on Iran's agenda.
The Iranians are very committed in making sure that this succeeds. And as a result, everything else is a lower priority, and nothing else is permitted to interfere with this.
And if there is a nuclear deal, that could further shift dynamics in the region, not only impacting Gaza, but other conflict zones like Syria and Iraq.
If the United States and Iran are actually on talking terms and are not competing with each other throughout the region, conflicts such as that one in Iraq right now could not only be easier resolved, but in fact, there's a likelihood to believe that actually this conflict would not have arisen in the first place.
But while we're seeing important shifts in the complex world of geopolitics, few expect a complete sea change to come over Iran or any other regional player.
I think the Iranians are continuing to be very pro-Palestinian. I think that's going to be part of their policy and their rhetoric and identity that they're not going to be changing. The question is, to what extent does their desire or their opinions translate into operational policy?
Now, Parsi is taking advantage of the relative silence of Iran and other nations by saying that the Arabs are not even supporting Hamas any longer. Israel has actually blamed Iran for supporting Hamas in this conflict, but Parsi says Hamas is receiving more support actually from Qatar and Turkey, though, Mike, it's become relatively isolated in that region.
Boy, you really need a scorecard to keep track of everything, don't you?
Yeah, it's very complex.
Francis Coe, thanks so much.